Welcome to Pharaoh's Code, where the secrets of ancient history come to life. From the secrets of Egypt's forgotten dynasties to wonders carved in stone, we uncover the hidden secrets of our past. One discovery at a time. Subscribe and enter a world where time speaks. When physicist Louis Walter, who had won the Nobel Prize, visited the pyramids of Mexico, he stood before them and said,
"These pyramids don't shake me much. The ones that truly astonish me are those standing at the edge of the desert in Giza."
"That is the dilemma. Minds have long failed to answer even the simplest questions about the pyramids. Why were the pyramids built using such massive stones? What method was used to lift these gigantic blocks to such great heights? How were the tunnels and passages beneath the pyramids made so straight? Despite thousands of inscriptions, drawings and papyri, there isn't a single one that clearly explains how the Giza pyramids were built.
Neither humans nor jinn could replicate such a masterpiece.
The first question that might come to your mind as you stand in front of the Giza pyramids is, how could a people, still in the early stages of their civilization, build such a structure? One that we still can't fully understand or replicate today. And they didn't just build it once, they repeated the process multiple times. It's true that the Giza pyramids are the most famous and grand, but they are part of a larger group of massive pyramids. All the pyramids were built west of the Nile Valley, with the majority falling into 10 main groups, stretching from Abu Rawash in the north to Fayum in the south. Today, over 100 pyramids have been discovered across Egypt. Travelers and scholars have studied Egyptian civilization since ancient times, but it's clear that the pyramids have confounded everyone who tried to solve their mystery. They continue to puzzle experts in physics, geology, astronomy and architecture. According to the official story, Egyptian civilization began in a structured form with the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt by King Narmer around 3300 BCE. In ancient Egypt, the sun, life's primary source, rises in the east and sets in the west. Therefore, the west was considered the land of the dead, and tombs began to be built there. Over time, those tombs evolved into the complete pyramid shape. The first issue with the official narrative is the idea of a sudden leap in development. The Step Pyramid of Saqqara, considered the first stone pyramid, was built around 2630 BCE. Just 70 years later, 3 of Egypt's greatest and most massive pyramids were built, all attributed to Pharaoh Sneferu, the first king of the 4th dynasty. The Step Pyramid was designed with a height of 60 meters and built with medium-sized stones that were relatively easy to manage. But the pyramids that followed became vastly more complex, larger stones, more advanced construction techniques, and the introduction of true pyramid shapes instead of step designs. A 70-year period doesn't seem sufficient to explain such a leap, unless it was tied to a major discovery or invention. For example, in 1850, we were still using basic machines, and just 70 years later, airplanes were flying, because of the invention of the engine. Or think of how computers caused a massive leap forward. So what invention or discovery could have led to the jump from the Step Pyramid of Djoser to the bent and red pyramids of Dashur? Nothing changed. Stone was still stone, workers were still workers, and simple tools were still being used. Iron hadn't yet been discovered, nor had the wheel or pulleys. So how did they do it? The usual answer is that it was due to the genius and faith of the ancient Egyptians. But what exactly did they do? The era of building giant pyramids lasted less than 100 years. After that, pyramid quality mysteriously declined. One common explanation is that costs were too high or resources too scarce. But the pyramids at Giza and Dashur remain unrivaled in their unique design and execution, suggesting that their construction required decades, if not centuries, of accumulated knowledge in astronomy, engineering, geology and stoneworking. That's why many believe the advanced geometry of the pyramids proves that Egyptian civilization is older than we think. These are not ordinary buildings. The Great Pyramid in particular has received more archaeological and historical attention than any other pyramid in the world. Dozens of books have been written about it alone. Why? mainly because of its sheer size and the precision with which it was built. Each of its 4 sides measures about 230 meters. The sides are aligned with extreme accuracy to the cardinal directions, east, west, north and south. The pyramid's north-south axis is almost perfectly aligned with Earth's axis, with a deviation of only 3/60ths of a degree. That's smaller than the degree marks on a tiny protractor. In 1884, its deviation was measured at 9/60ths of a degree, still only 3 times greater than the current pyramid's deviation, even though modern tools are far more advanced, and the same near-perfect alignment can be found in Khafra's pyramid. To this day, no one knows how the ancient Egyptians managed to orient the pyramid so precisely to true north. The Great Pyramid is estimated to be made of 2.5 million stone blocks, each weighing between 10 and 15 tons. The King's Chamber and its ceilings are entirely made of granite blocks cut from Aswan, weighing up to 1,500 tons in total. This chamber is located 40 meters above the base of the pyramid. No one knows how they lifted such massive blocks that high. Before construction began, the builders prepared the ground by cutting into the Giza Plateau's bedrock and laying a base of Tura limestone to flatten the surface, an area equivalent to 13 acres, roughly the size of several football fields. The pyramid's core stones were quarried from the Giza Plateau itself. The greatest challenge remains. Why build the entire structure using millions of massive stones? And what about transporting these stones from the plateau to the construction site? One proposed method is the use of sledges. There's an ancient carving showing a group of workers dragging a statue on a sledge. Some believe this is how all the massive stones in Egypt were transported.
One researcher documented 172 cases of stone pulling and noted that the statue in one such case weighed 58 tons, meaning each worker would have had to pull around 340 kilograms. Honestly, that number is extremely exaggerated. Of course, someone might say not all the workers had to carve it, but let's take a look at the practical experiment done on the bell.
A French team, working with some Egyptians, tried to simulate the pulling and transporting process, which is considered the biggest challenge in building the pyramids. But that wasn't enough. We need more men under the ancient blocks that block the corridors in Wadi al-Jarf. Archaeologists only found the wood, no sleds. With a very small return in one day, using 33 workers, the block only moved 46 meters along a 25-degree slope.
So, how can we solve this issue? They decided to quickly build a temporary sled. The block started to move faster. Oh my God, it's moving better now. But what if it gets stuck? When they added just a little bit of clay meant to reduce friction, the block stopped moving entirely. I couldn't believe it. By the end of the afternoon, they had only moved the block 275 meters from the starting point.
Connecting this to the Great Pyramid, we might expect progress of just 32 meters per hour. Yes, for a block of this size and weight, this might be one of the most pessimistic estimates. I think they were more experienced and had a technique that allowed them to move things faster than that, at 25 degrees. While the pyramid builders had to pull the stones on ascending ramps to reach the Pyramid of Khafra first, then the Great Pyramid. The slope angle reached over 45 degrees in some cases.
According to a film, the weight of one block was 30 tons. This was the maximum crane capacity at that stage of the Egyptian pyramid project. The stars point to 4 celestial groups. Let's take the example of the star shafts. The shaft was so small that they first had to make an opening in the first stone block, then make an identical one in the block behind it, and so on, so that the shaft would point precisely to the Sirius star, rising from a 40-degree angle. The whole thing is incredibly complex because they had to make this shaft in exactly the same position in each stone block over a distance of 60 meters. And then there's the descending passage in the Great Pyramid that leads to the subterranean chamber. It's carved into the plateau itself, with a total length of 100 meters, 60 of which are cut directly into solid rock. The current passage in the Great Pyramid is closed. The one you see in the picture is the Bent Pyramid Passage at Dashur, but it follows the same idea. As you descend, you find yourself inside the rocky plateau itself, and it's clear from the walls that it's all carved from solid rock.
Now the challenge is this. To carve such a passage, you'd only need one worker at a time, kneeling. Two people couldn't fit because of the narrow angle. The slope only changes by 1 meter every 20 meters. So if a worker was really carving by hand, how could he maintain the alignment of the passage while bent over the whole time? Naturally, that would require some kind of visual aid. One suggestion was the use of mirrors to reflect light inside. But the reflected light only covers the area the mirror is pointed at, and the rest of the room stays dark. If someone stands behind the mirror, the light is blocked, so it only works in small areas. For the light to reach all the rooms and still appear 100% natural, they would need something more advanced. And here we need to distinguish between lighting and electricity. They're two different things.
Some believe they used a second type of light other than fire, something they had clearly discovered, because they would have needed a stable and consistent light source. For such complex passages, they also needed a drilling method that ensured straight lines. But what was that method? We don't know. Today, we have modern rock drilling equipment. Oil and mining companies can drill straight lines through solid rock. But what tool did the ancient Egyptians use? The pyramid's designer clearly didn't care much about spending effort on polishing the core blocks. That came later, when they covered the pyramids with limestone casing stones, which were transported from the east bank of the Nile. The distance between two stones was less than a millimeter. For that kind of precision, the stones had to be cut completely straight and highly polished, so they'd fit tightly together. We're not talking about 100 or 200 stones, we're talking about millions of massive stones, because all the pyramids were originally covered with these casing stones, which collapsed over time. We're looking for a centralized tool, something that could cut the stones precisely.
Before building Khafra's pyramid, the Giza plateau wasn't level. The western side was higher than the eastern side. So what did they do? They carved 8 meters deep into the rock over a length of 220 meters. The stones removed equaled more than 90,000 tons, a massive amount. These stones were then used for the eastern side of the construction. It's reasonable to think it took about 10 years to do all that. Nobody casually lifts those kinds of weights, but maybe that was their typical timeline.
Now about electricity. This one single stone, the shoulder stone, weighs 110 tons and is 12 meters long. You'd need 200 workers just to lift it. How would they even manage that? Why not use smaller stones and move them quickly and more easily? It would have taken less effort and time. Why build the pyramid right there on the plateau? Why not choose a different, easier spot?
One important thing we talked about earlier, in front of the pyramid, there is a stone that's 12 meters long and weighs 110 tons. One single stone. That completely breaks the idea of dragging stones by hand. It just doesn't make sense. You get the feeling that the ancients purposely made things harder for themselves, like they said, what's the most difficult way to do this, and then did it that way. Clearly, weight didn't matter to them. On the contrary, it seems transporting the heaviest stones was actually easier for them, and maybe even saved time. That's why we don't hear the usual story about manual labour and dragging unless they were deliberately torturing themselves. The archaeological evidence suggests that they had access to something more advanced than we do. But what was it? We're not sure, but the absence of physical evidence suggests it didn't leave a trace.
Also, the plateau rose in steps from one side to the other. All of Egypt in those days, across all its cities and people, stood together for 10 years, working hard to create what we now call Arab Egypt. It's important to refer to the accounts of ancient travelers when it comes to the pyramids. These people lived hard, rugged lives. Everything they built, fortresses, granaries, mosques, houses, was based on their physical strength. So when they saw the massive size of the pyramids, they were truly astonished. That's the real mystery. One of them said, even if the people of Egypt worked for 10 years, this still wouldn't be within human capability. Other travelers said similar things, that the pyramids are beyond what any human, angels, or aliens could do, because they weren't offered a convincing explanation. You're showing them massive stones and giant pyramids, and then claiming they were built with just a hammer. That just doesn't add up. It clearly wasn't done that way. There must have been advanced tools that we simply haven't found. They were either lost or disappeared over time. Now we need to ask, can these experiments to replicate pyramid building actually succeed?
In 1974, before coming to Egypt, a research team began preparatory studies for a pyramid building project. These included studies on site selection, estimating the number of workers required, designing the pyramid's dimensions, calculating the size of the sleds and rollers, and every other detail, so they could start work immediately once on site. We're talking about Japan, a country known for top-tier planning and organization. Initially, they planned to build a pyramid as tall as a candle as a symbolic project. But despite their intelligence and technology, unexpected challenges arose. The first step was to cut trees on the opposite bank of the Nile Valley. Since cutting metal stones was very difficult and time-consuming, they had to immediately revise the design. They reduced the pyramid's planned height from 20 meters to 10 meters, cutting the number of stones by 50% just to try and complete the project. Next, they attempted to transport the stones from the quarry to the Giza Plateau using 100 workers and sleds. But the idea failed. The stones barely moved. They resorted to using trucks and steamships to transport the stones. The third step was arranging the stones. After the stones reached the pyramid's surface, they needed to lift them again. The Japanese used cranes to raise the stones to the top section of the pyramid. They even used helicopters to place the stones in position. Keep in mind, there were no inner chambers, tunnels, or anything like that, just a stack of stones. Giza's Great Pyramid has over 200 layers and 2 large blocks at the top. But the Japanese built theirs using every modern tool available: steam power, cranes, and helicopters. This shows us that most current pyramid building theories are romanticized and unrealistic. This time we'll be looking at the NOVA team's pyramid experiment, an extremely important project. Dr. Mark Lehner, a highly respected Egyptologist, led the team. He has spent his entire career studying the pyramids, and he wanted to reconstruct a pyramid using only stone blocks, with no inner passages, chambers or granite. He details this experiment in his book. Due to pressure from filming a documentary, they had just 1.5 months to build the pyramid. As a result, they had to use tools and technologies that were not available to the ancient Egyptians. So, what did they use? Cranes for lifting, advanced tools for moving the stones, and yet this pyramid was only 6 meters tall. The basic challenge of moving and lifting huge stones wasn't solved. They simply used cranes. A documentary was produced about the project, titled This Old Pyramid. But when they aired it, they cut out all the scenes showing modern equipment, misleading viewers into thinking no advanced tools were used. So what was the real goal of the Japanese and NOVA experiments? To prove how the pyramid was built? In truth, they proved how it wasn't built. That's why I've become more skeptical about how the pyramids were constructed. Despite their great effort, an effort I deeply respect, the projects were always rushed and pressured by deadlines. In the end, the blame often falls on lack of training or worker inexperience, but that just shifts the responsibility onto poor labourers. Those workers would simply do what they were told: pull a rope, lift a stone. To replicate pyramid building today, society would have to be structured like it was in ancient Egypt. Why not try building a pyramid in America? In my view, it all comes down to 2 things: knowledge and tools. The ancient Egyptians had the knowledge and the means to apply it. So the question is, did this knowledge and technology vanish, or can we rediscover it?
This brings us to a man who makes us rethink the entire question.
In Europe, after some time, neighbours started noticing huge stone structures built by a man. Monoliths weighing 23 tons, ghost towers, and a single stone obelisk 8 meters long and weighing 30 tons. What was strange was that the man was a recluse, and yet somehow alone he achieved this. There were no cranes or heavy equipment at the time. The work seemed nearly impossible.
He claimed he understood the secrets of the ancient Egyptians and harnessed a magnetic phenomenon. He believed that one day we could cancel gravity and make stones float. Of course, it's all a mystery. He never explained further. Edward Leeds Cullinan died in 1951. and since then, many have tried to study the site to learn how he worked with such heavy stones, but no one has figured it out. I wouldn't rule out that he might have discovered some ancient knowledge. That's why I truly believe that massive stones, some weighing up to 10 tons, could have been moved with the help of magnetic energy.
Magnetic levitation is now a developing field, and calculations are used to determine the strength of a magnetic field that can suspend an object mid-air. Today, maglev technology is used in trains in China that reach speeds of 500 kilometers per hour, one of its most impressive applications. The pyramid was likely designed by brilliant minds in ancient Egypt, experts in astronomy, engineering, chemistry, geology, and perhaps other sciences we still don't understand. After all this effort, could the pyramid really have been built just to store food, or does it hold a much deeper purpose? This brings us to our next episode. Are the pyramids truly the tombs of kings?